the Transkambin endoscopic spine surgery. In listening in, it sounds like many of you are already doing this, but so forgive me if I am a little too basic. And to start, just want to disclose some of my potential conflicts of interest. I am a consultant, and I've helped a variety of different spine companies develop their minimally invasive systems, et cetera, especially Eloquence, and the endoscopic system that you're going to see is from them. But I will try to be very objective. And I think everyone knows the importance of this gentleman, Parvis Kambin, who described this anatomic kind of hidden secret door to a treasure trove of new ways to take care of patients. And basically, what is it? We call it LESS, lumbar endoscopic spine surgery, which you have to admit is a very cool name for a minimally invasive procedure. So this is like essentially what is it? It is what I call the oldest state-of-the-art procedure that we have, because it has been around for a long time. And I think this picture just immediately tells you what the procedure is. It's through Kambin's triangle, getting at the disc, and you can see the cannula is right where you need it to be because most disc herniations are there. And Dr. Kambin's group did a lot of work, including the publication of a very good randomized controlled trial that was published in 1999. That is 25 years ago, and this work was probably done 5 years before that. So this is not a new technique. Since then, a number of other giants in the field have led the way. They trained kind of like the second wave of people. And please forgive me if I'm missing somebody because this list is not complete. And for any of you that can think of somebody else that needs to be on either one of these pictures, let me know so I can add them. But since then, if you look at the amount of work that was done just by simply asking how many publications in endoscopic spine surgery are there, just in PubMed, this is it, and this is old too, by the way. The number is tremendous, over 5,000 studies. Now compare that with XLIF, MISTLIF, and microdiscectomy. There are more studies in endoscopic spine surgery than those 3 other new surgeries combined. And because of that, there are more than 1 systematic reviews, and there's at least 2, probably 3 now, meta-analyses. That's when you know you have plenty of publications because people can just start pooling the data. And these are the numbers that are important, and pretty much all these studies say the same thing. So the first question about does Transkambin approach for endoscopic surgery of the spine work? This is not a question anymore. The answer is yes. There's better data on this surgery than any of the other minimally invasive surgeries that we do. So that is not really the question, although you would think it is based on like the PR that we have in at least the US and probably throughout many areas of the world where people still think maybe this works or doesn't work. And that's probably the more important question. If I keep saying endoscopy is so great, why is the history of its adoption so terrible? Why is it that even after 30 years, we're just the minority of the spine surgeons? So I'm the only real dedicated endoscopic spine surgeon in San Diego that does transforaminal endoscopic surgery. I do interlaminar and other things, but that's the original. I'm pretty much the only one. There's a few people that do it intermittently, but I do it routinely, and I almost never do a microdiscectomy. So why is that? There's probably 2 main reasons. The first has to do with reimbursement. That's an idiosyncrasy of the crazy healthcare environment that we live in America. So hopefully this doesn't apply to you, but luckily that's changing. The more important thing, I think, and probably the more kind of important thing to address is the learning curve. And I think everyone knows that the learning curve is not great. I did a kind of a review, a systematic review of the learning curve. And for endoscopic surgery, it's anywhere from 35 to 72 cases of a learning curve. That's crazy. That's way too many. You can't do 35 cases and screw them all up until you get good at it or have a terrible record. That's why it's not being adopted, because it's too difficult to get started, because the competing surgery is a microdiscectomy usually, and that is pretty much one of the best operations that we do. So it's really hard to go from a great operation that you're very comfortable with and then struggling through a very technically difficult surgery with lots of initial complications. So we always talk about this. The learning curve is difficult, but we seldom ask the next question, why is the learning curve so difficult? And then we never ask, how can we make it better? I think that's changing, and I think everyone realizes there's a lot of work to do, and I can go on and talk about some of the insights on this, but I think that's a topic of a separate discussion. But suffice it to say that the key elements are that we need situations like this, where groups of people get together and address this problem in a concerted effort, in a scientific way, because it's not a one-person kind of effort. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but the instrumentation has not changed very much in 25 years. And it would be like me using my iPhone 8 when I have an iPhone 14. Yes, the iPhone 8 works, but this blows it out of the water. So we need to have a concerted effort to try to push the endoscopic companies to work on improving instrumentation. They have a hard time because it's not a big money item in America. So less amount of money in the pool, less amount of money for research and development. But we have to keep pushing on this. And then, like anything that is difficult, Dr. Abbasi said it, it's like, flying a plane. You have to learn how to do it, and you have to practice, and you should not fly by yourself until you have a certain number of training. It can't be over the weekend. So for right now, if there's one thing you should do is find a mentor that you know and trust that does the surgery a lot and pays attention to the outcomes of their patients. See how they do it exactly start to finish, and do it exactly the same way until you get good at it to the point where you can start making modifications. And probably the OLIF technique is the similar way. If you do it exactly the way Dr. Abbasi does it, it's probably unbelievably fast and unbelievably safe and efficient. So with that, I thank you very much. Oh, I left out one thing. The last thing is the mentorship. And I think that goes along with finding that surgeon that you know and trust, and that it's not just a one-time event when you go learn. When you go home, the interactions continue. So it is a journey and a process. And I think mentorship is the last thing that we really need to focus on, and almost needs to be one-on-one. So with that, thank you very, very much for having me.